Facile formulas, catchy slogans, 10-step programs, and quick fixes too often dominate today's management training programs. But in organizations, as in all of life, human behavior is seldom predictable, and business dilemmas do not easily lend themselves to gimmicks or simplistic answers. In Management of the Absurd, psychologist, educator, and former CEO Richard Farson presents a series of management paradoxes designed to challenge conventional wisdom and encourage managers to re-examine their assumptions about effective leadership. Good morning, this is Ron. It is November the 7th. This is Story Time. And I am reading today from chapter 28. There are no leaders, only leadership. One of the great enemies of organizational effectiveness is our stereotypical image of a leader. We imagine a commanding figure perhaps standing in front of an audience, talking, not listening, with an entourage of assistants standing by, or sitting behind a large clean desk barking out orders, taking charge, aggressive, no nonsense, a bulldog. Such images of leaders get us into trouble not just because they fail to conform to reality, but because they set us up for roles that are ultimately dysfunctional. The macho image of leadership associated with men like Vince Lombardi, Ross Perot, and Lee Iacocca makes us forget that the real strength of a leader is the ability to elicit the strength of the group. This paradox is another way of saying that leadership is less the property of a person than the property of a group. Leadership is distributed among members of a group, and they in turn play such vital roles as taskmaster, clown, mother figure, and so on. Relying on one person, the manager, for example, to provide all the leadership builds expectations that cannot be met. Moreover, it robs the group of its power, leading to overdependence on the manager. In turn, the leader's response to this dependence is sometimes to micromanage, getting into areas of control and responsibility that represent a poor use of time and may far exceed his or her capabilities, actually reducing the productivity of the group. Defined by the group. People who are leaders in one situation usually are followers in others. For example, they may be managers at work, but just interested parents at a PTA meeting, or mere spectators at social gatherings. Leadership is situational, less a personal quality than specific to a situation. True leaders are defined by the groups they are serving, and they understand the job as being interdependent with the group. We have all seen leaders who successfully move from one organization to another, even though they may not be expert in the second organization's business. They are able to do this because they define their task as evoking the knowledge, skills, and creativity of those who are already with the organization. They are secure enough in their own identities to be able to be influenced by new information and to accept the ideas of others in the group. They are especially able to elicit the intelligence and participation of group members who otherwise might not join the discussions. In a well-functioning group, the behavior of the leader is not all that different from the behavior of other responsible group members. In fact, if it were not for the trappings of titles, private corner offices, desks with overhangs, a seat at the head of the table, and so on, it might be difficult to identify the leader in a group that is working well. Making life easier. The best leaders are servants of their people. I once conducted a study aimed at trying to understand how people achieve power in a group. We found that those people who were most successful in achieving power did not dominate the group. Rather, they served it. They would go to the blackboard and perform what might be thought of as secretarial tasks for the group. They would call on those who had not spoken. They listened attentively to everyone. They spoke their own views clearly and fully, but mostly they encouraged others to speak theirs. They helped the group to stay focused on the problems. In other words, they tried to serve the group. Humility comes naturally to the best leaders. They seldom take credit for themselves, but instead give credit to the group with which they have worked. They characteristically make life easier for their employees. They are constantly arranging situations, engineering jobs, smoothing out the processes, removing the barriers. They think about who needs what. They define their job as finding ways of releasing the creative potential that exists within each individual employee and in each group with which they work. Because so much of the work of a manager is as a servant, a counselor, a confidant, it is surprising that there are not more women in these jobs. since such functions are often associated with women's traditional roles. Were it not for the unfortunate image of a leader as dominator rather than servant, we probably would find more women at the top. Leaders we don't recognize. We forget sometimes that leadership is a shared value, a shared role played partly by people who are not titular leaders. Kings have regents whispering in their ears. Presidents have advisors. CEOs have consultants. Managers have assistants who help shape their behavior, but who do not take the risks of leadership and who do not get the credit. Indeed, leaders are themselves often led and managed by their employees from the bottom up. Colleagues whose ideas, assistance, arguments, and sometimes dogged resistance have real influence. Watching an accomplished executive secretary at work can make one wonder sometimes just who is managing whom. I have found that there are two kinds of good employees. One is the willing assistant prepared to accept whatever tasks are assigned and to accomplish them with dispatch and goodwill. The other goes further, anticipating what the needs are going to be and then offering solutions, not problems, ideas, not complaints. This anticipatory role is seldom asked for. Nevertheless, it is an important leadership role played by those who are not called leaders. The most powerful force. Most of the actions of leaders don't work, just as most surfers miss more waves than they catch. To complicate matters, there are so many different kinds and styles of leadership, and the actions called for are so complex that there is no sure model to follow. Yet leadership is the most powerful force on earth. Arguments could be made for other forces: greed, territoriality, guilt, fear, hate, love, spirituality, but without leadership to mobilize them, they are relatively weak. Leadership, therefore, deserves a great deal more attention than it has been given, especially if we want to make certain that it is exercised in ways that help our organization thrive and our civilization progress. And that is the end of chapter 8. There are no leaders, only leadership. And I will be making comments and critiques on my blog at www.ronaldhardgrove.blogspot.com. And coming up then it'll be on Thursday, the 9th, it will be chapter 29. The more experienced the managers, the more they trust simple intuition. And that will be on Thursday, November 9th. Until then, thank you very much for joining me, and have a great day.